I see you're already enjoying early summer. I see wine and books, and everybody's wearing light colors. I'm wearing light color pants. Must be that time of year. Welcome to all of you. It is indeed a pleasure to have you here tonight, where we're going to celebrate and to try to dig into the convoluted world of Gustav Mahler. And when I say the word convoluted, I am being polite. Before talking about Mahler, let me give you a little bit of a background of the piece that will take place in the middle. A new piece by one of our own here in Nashville, Edgar Meyer. Not only one of the most talented American composers, but also perhaps one of the greatest string bass players that has ever walked the face of this earth. I do have to tell you that one of the greatest joys of my tenure in Nashville, ever since I moved here in 2008, is the fact that I've gotten to hang out with some pretty cool people. I have gotten to hang around and to meet some wonderful musicians that make Nashville their home. And it has not only expanded my friendship base, but more importantly, it has expanded my knowledge of music base. Because indeed, Nashville, we do, those of us, I'm preaching to the crowd here, this town basically champions and represents every imaginable genre of music, and particularly American music. One of the things that I brag about wherever I travel is the fact that we have two streets, Music Row East and Music Row West. I brag about that, and it's so close to us. And the fact that everywhere I run into people, all of us, directly or indirectly, have connections with music. Either through our neighbor or through a friend who are either a manager or a publicist or they happen to live next door to Keith Urban. I don't know. But it's amazing to me that that's what makes this town unique. So ever since I came to Nashville, I have to say that it's been great for me to be welcomed by so many of my colleagues, musicians in this town, who not only called me and said, great, we're looking forward to seeing you, but more importantly, how can we collaborate? How can we find common ground to create projects that both of us can succeed at? You've already seen a few of these projects, the Bela Fleck Banjo Concerto, which we did a couple of years ago. That was created here, and again, it's so nice to have, as we were talking, both artists finish the concert, we get to go home and sleep. That doesn't happen very often for those of us who are musicians. So it is happening again, this time with Edgar Meyer. When I first came here, I had been a fan of Edgar for a long time. I knew of Edgar even back in Costa Rica. The bass players everywhere I go in the world, when they think of Edgar, it's like, I'm not worthy. They know that he's perhaps one of the greatest bass players that, again, incredibly gifted, virtuosic, in an instrument that you would normally think as a virtuoso or as a soloistic instrument. We normally think piano, violin, cello, but string bass. It's remarkable that he has made the instrument so mainstream that we now think of the string bass almost in a we're not surprised by it. And the fact that Edgar has also played so many different styles of music, not only classical. He has written 3 bass concertos for himself, but I know he's also collaborated with Bela and with a bunch of different artists in every genre. So this is a guy that has way too many interests. So finally I came here, we met, we had lunch together, and immediately I said, Edgar, I'm a fan, what should we do? And like most composers, they have all of these crazy dreams. All composers are always thinking of writing that next great concerto that will involve all the planets in the universe, and that will involve, helicopters flying on top of it. Okay, tone it down. Let's bring it back down and then come up with a project. What is it that you would like to do? And we'll play it. So think about it. For me, I'm looking for that excuse for you and I to share the stage together. So as normally these things happen, we talked about it. Month went by. We were not talking about it, but I put the idea on his mind. And one day, out of the blue, I get an email saying, I think I got it. For many years now, I've been wanting to write a double concerto for myself and for Joshua Bell. You see, him and Joshua Bell have known each other for many years. They are both graduates of University of Indiana, And in a way, I think that Edgar almost looks at Josh as a kid brother. And they have worked together many times. I said, you know, I've been wanting to write something for the both of us. And I said, well, you know, Josh, if you can make it work, we'll play it. So here we are. After years of getting schedules, after years of balancing, making sure that we're all available at the same time in the same hemisphere, in the same universe, we were able to pull it off. More importantly, because of the fact that we had Edgar and Joshua and the Nashville Symphony, basically, who came up with the idea, many other orchestras wanted to jump in as well. So this became a co-commission between some pretty amazing institutions, the Boston Symphony, us, the Toronto Symphony. So we're in good company. It wasn't very hard for them to agree to be a part of this project because of the people that were involved. So that also speaks volumes that these great ideas get gestated here in town. The piece, as you can imagine, not only having one of the great bass players, but also one of the great violin players in the world, there's going to be a lot of fireworks. The fact that Edgar is writing for himself, I was joking with him, he's like, so how do you do this? I mean, are you writing something? And then you say, no, it's too easy. Maybe I should write something harder. There are things that he's doing on the string bass that I have to tell you, I'm sure you're not going to find in any technique book for string bass. This is a guy that is so gifted and so built for the instrument that it almost makes it seem very easy. And for those of us who have to practice every day, that's very frustrating, actually. But for me, to be able to watch these two great artists who are not only great performers, but also great friends, there's a great chemistry on stage that for me, it has been an absolute joy to share this project with them. The concerto is your standard 3-movement, fast, low, fast concerto. A lot of both of them playing. The orchestra getting out of the way, which is fabulous because this is what you want to see. You want to see these artists. Literally, it's like being on the tightrope. You know, when you watch artists do these amazing fireworks with their instruments and basically playing off of each other, you need to have that chemistry. And as I said, I might have the best seat in the house tonight. And it is a very difficult piece. But I think you will definitely enjoy it, and more importantly, you should basically take ownership of this because this is your piece. It was all created here, and now it's going out into the rest of the world. So on to Gustav Mahler. Where to begin? This season has been bookended by the music of Gustav Mahler. You remember we opened the season with the 8th Symphony, the Symphony of 1,000. For many of you, I know that's still very fresh in your mind. It's still very much in mind. That was a very unique, special, once-in-a-lifetime almost opportunity for me to do a piece like that. And to finish the season with Mahler's first attempt at writing a symphony, it's also very important. Many of you who have attended my discussions over the last few years know that I have a special affinity for the music of Gustav Mahler, but also, a few years ago, we had the centennial of not only his birth, but the centennial of his death as well. He died in 1911, and because of that, I kind of said this might be a perfect opportunity to maybe survey all of the works of Gustav Mahler, not only the symphonies, but eventually the song cycles, and every piece of music that Mahler wrote. You see, we think of Gustav Mahler in the same pantheon of Mozart, the same pantheon as Haydn and Beethoven and Stravinsky and all the great musicians. But here's the caveat. Mahler only wrote about 13 pieces. That's it. When you think about it, compare that to Mozart's 41 symphonies and 50 operas and string quartets and string quintet and Beethoven's, you know, Mahler's work is 13 or 14 pieces. That's it. There's a reason for that. He wasn't a composer. His day job, he was a conductor. He could only compose in the summer when there was no conducting. More specifically, he was an opera conductor. He always dreamt of becoming a composer, making a living. But no, he had to conduct to pay his bills. By the way, don't feel sorry for him. He was the best conductor in the world at the time. Respected and feared by musicians and singers everywhere. This was a man that was beyond demanding. This was a man for whom perfection was not just a goal. He demanded it, and he basically feared people into doing it. It's no wonder that he died at age 50. This is a man that burned every imaginable bridge that you could burn. He upset everybody to the point that they respected him, but you could only work with him for so long. You could maybe put up with him for a year or 2 years. Give credit to the Vienna State Opera. They put up with him for 10 years. And that tenure, by the way, to this day in the 21st century is so legendary. They still talk about it. The way that he coached singers, the way that he rehearsed the orchestra, he removed all of these standard cuts from operas, fired musicians as if it was just a sport, fired singers, sopranos, you name it. All for his crazy demands of what he wanted to create. Perfection. The man had issues. I'll give you a little snapshot of why. There's a reason. He was the second of 14 children, born in 1860 in what was then Bohemia, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, about 60 miles from Prague. He was the second of 14 children, 8 of which did not make it past 10. So growing up, he saw many of his siblings die in the home. From a very early age, Mahler was surrounded by grief, was surrounded by tragedy, was surrounded by death. At the same time, for whatever reason, most of his homes, wherever he moved around, and his father did move around, were always very close to the military garrisons. So the sound of trumpets playing taps early in the morning, and the sound of marching armies, the sounds of military music was very clear in his mind, maybe put something in his subconscious. At some point later in his life, he actually met with Sigmund Freud. Man, Sigmund Freud knew that, man, he could make a career just with that guy. All of these things are very well known in the life of Mahler because we see all of these inner demons that were placed early in his life. We see that, we hear it in his music very clearly. He was born a Jew. You hear that in his music. In the symphony, especially today, you're going to hear a lot of klezmer. A lot of it. You're going to hear his love for nature, the sounds of nature, the sounds of the forest, the sounds of cuckoo birds, the sounds of robins, the sounds of river streaming. The opening of the first symphony specifically says, "Wie ein Naturlaut," like the sounds of nature. This is not an orchestra. If you sound like an orchestra, wrong. This is intended to sound like a forest. Something else that you need to know about Mahler, again, growing up, is that all of these tragedies that surrounded him, he had to overcome them in some way, and for him, music was that way to do it. He went to school at the Vienna Conservatory, fantastic student, not only excelling in piano and composition, but conducting specifically. He had the ability to lead people. He was very good at it. All 3 of his college roommates died insane. What was it about this guy? 2 of them, very famous. The composer Hans Roth and the composer Hugo Wolf, perhaps one of the greatest composers of songs. They were roommates with Mahler. And there's another one, violinist Krisnicki, I forget the name, but all 3 of them died insane. So there's something about this guy's posse. How can you not write about this into your music? He started at the bottom, conducting operettas. He literally started from nothing and went up to take the best job in the world, which was music director of the Vienna State Opera, appointed directly by the emperor himself. To do so, he had to convert to Catholicism, which to this day there's a huge controversy whether he did it for real religious reasons or he just did it as a business proposition. Knowing personally everything I know about Mahler, it was a business proposition. He wanted the job, sure, I'll sign, I'll do it. Because this was a man that for him, music was his life. Art. Nothing was going to get in his way of him achieving his wishes and his dreams as an artist. And a place like the Vienna State Opera basically gave him unlimited resources to fulfill his artistic dreams. The best singers, the best settings, the best orchestra probably. So he was not going to give that away. As I said before, during the year, his day job was conductor. Everybody knew him as Gustav Mahler, the conductor. The fact that he composed was only known to a few people. And only he was the only one that was actually conducting his own music. Richard Strauss, who was friends with his, every now and then might conduct something, but the music still was a little bit too beyond most people. They did not understand how somebody could write music with such grief. They were not ready for it. Of course, World War I, World War II would come around in the 20th century, and after the 50s, we get it now. For the first 50 years of the 20th century, his music really was not performed. Something happened after World War II, I think, that people made the connections. We also have to add the fact that conductors started bringing the music. People like Leonard Bernstein, even his protege, Bruno Walter, started making a case for the music. But at the beginning, again, Mahler was seen as a conductor, as a great conductor, not a composer. The first symphony that you're going to hear tonight was written in 1887, 1888, premiered in 1889 in Budapest, with the Budapest Philharmonic, Mahler conducting. How can you make your first impression? How scary can that be, writing your first symphony? You know, your calling card. This is your first attempt at going out into the wall and presenting yourself to the audience. And what an incredible achievement. For me, it is. Personally, I will never forget the first time I heard the opening of this symphony. And just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. It's one of the most magical things I have ever heard in my life to this day. The opening of this symphony is unlike anything that you've ever heard before. And I think it's the beginning of what would become the incredible survey of the 9 or 10 symphonies of Mahler, however you count them. Like most composers, Mahler liked to revise things. Conductors, we love to conduct Mahler, you know why? Because with Mahler, there's never a question of his intentions. He is the conductor's conductor. This is a guy that went beyond being specific about what he wants. He would not just say allegro. No, allegro without dragging, like the sound of nature, and put a smile on your face, and indications at the spot is, if the tuba cannot play this soft enough, don't have him play, have the contrabassoon play it. Things specific that says, nicht eilen. Do not rush. You will get the urge to rush, do not. Nicht schleppend. I love the word nicht. Nicht schleppend. Do not drag. You will get the urge to slow down, don't. One of my favorites in the first symphony, the score is filled with footnotes, filled with indication for the conductor. First violins, crescendo. Second violins, no crescendo. And my favorite one, underline 4 times, asterisk, kein Irrtum. This is not a mistake. You are supposed to play this with the wooden part of the bow. You see, the bow has hair. He writes in a moment, he writes in there, play with the wooden part of the bow. And just to be sure, kein Irrtum. This is not a mistake. Why would he want them to play with the wooden part of the bow? In klezmer music, I was telling the players today, that poor traveling musician playing wedding gigs, at some point, the hair would run out on the bow. You do know that. Poor musician, playing gigs, street, or maybe if lucky enough, he plays a wedding gig. And eventually he runs out of hair. So a lot of times they would just have to play with the wooden part. Either feed your family or put hair on your bow. It's very common that players, so Mahler did that in this. He asked our very academically trained musicians to turn their bows around and play with the wooden, which creates a very particular folksy sound. But again, kein Irrtum. And you know why he puts kein Irrtum? I can promise you, he was conducting the piece. I can just see Gustav with his glasses. And he starts playing, and some violinist in some orchestra sitting in the back, excuse me, maestro, is this correct? And never again Immediately, he made the note. So 100 years from now, there's not going to be a question in anybody's mind. He even tells you where musicians should sit. At one point, he says, I want a trumpet and a trombone to reinforce the brass, and I want them seated by the French horns. Specific, stuff that specific. It's incredibly remarkable. One of my favorites happens in the Sixth Symphony. The second trombone has an F sharp in this incredible chord, but this F sharp that sounds awful. It sounds so wrong that, again, I can just see the trombone player going, excuse me, maestro, F sharp. And Mahler saying, yes, it is correct. And again, a little asterisk goes up. He's like, F sharp is correct. So I made the point that conducting Mahler is relatively easy because you don't have to guess. With Mozart, with Beethoven, with Stravinsky, with any other composer, they write allegro. Good luck. They write ritardando. Mahler even goes as far as saying beat in 4, beat in 2. Slow, but in 2, which gives you a sense of how fast or how slow it should go. Because you can only do it so slow. So again, he gives you exactly, even from a conductor, here you beat in 4, here you beat in 2. Here, pick up the score, you could conduct Mahler. It's remarkable. But it's once you get underneath what's in the music, that you have to really go beyond your psychological, you really have to go deep into your subconscious. And trying to capture not only the darkness, but there's also hope. Like with most composers, even Beethoven, as he was losing his hearing, there is hope in his music. And that's something that comes with the human spirit. Even somebody as convoluted and as screwed up as Gustav Mahler was, he always thought that the light would come up eventually, that his world would get better. A lot of times, I will tell you, yeah, it didn't get better because of himself. Because he was so unbending. He was so not willing to compromise his artistic ideals, that I can see why people would hate that. I can see why they could not collaborate with him, because this was a man that could not compromise, especially not when it came to artistic matters. No wonder he was the only one who could conduct his own music. Only he got it. Only he understood the demons that were lurking underneath. Tonight you're in for a special treat. You see, this symphony, unlike the other ones, has gone through a lot of transformations. Because it was the first one, written in 1889, premiered in 1889 to 1911, he had a lot of time to revise it. And as I said before, with Mahler, he wrote 9, 10, or 11 symphonies, depending on how you count. You see, Gustav Mahler was also very superstitious. Artists tend to be like that, but Mahler was a little bit like that. There's something about writing Symphony No. 9 that composers avoid. Beethoven, 9 symphonies. Schubert, 9 symphonies. Bruckner, 9 symphonies. I mean, and I can go on. The number 9 for composers writing symphonies, it's scary. Mahler was very aware of this, by the way. He wrote the 8th symphony, which we opened the season with, the Symphony of 1000. And then he took a pause. And he said, well, maybe I should not write number 9. So he actually wrote a song cycle, which is called Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth, which is for tenor, mezzo or soprano, and orchestra. But you know what? Don't tell anybody, but it is actually a symphony. It is, in every sense of the word, Das Lied von der Erde, in structure, in form, in movements, it's a symphony. It just doesn't have a number. So he wrote it, in a sense, I guess, to try to fool the counting gods. Listen, this wasn't purpose. We knew this is what he was doing. By the way, we will do Das Lied at some point, I promise you. Based on Chinese poems, by the way. Yeah, he went that far. Then he started writing the 9th, finished it, started writing the 10th. He didn't get to finish it. So make whatever you want out of it. The 10th symphony is somewhat complete. The first movement is mostly complete. There are versions of the completest version. He left enough sketches that musicologists have actually finished it. I will do one of those versions eventually of the full. The Derek Cook particularly, as a British musicologist, I think did a very good job. I have done the Adagio, which is really what Mahler completed in the 10th symphony, which is incredible. It is really knocking at the door of the beginnings of the 20th century. Mahler was a modernist before anybody else came up. Mahler was already pushing the envelope in so many ways. And I guess because he wasn't depending upon composition, he could really push the envelope. He didn't have to worry about paying the bills. Again, he was a conductor. Many of you might not know this, but Mahler actually came to the US. After the thing blew up in Vienna in 1907, which, by the way, was a very tough year for Mahler. The Sixth Symphony of his is called the Tragic. The last movement has 3 blows of fate that kill the hero. Mahler himself spoke of it many times. There are 3 blows of fate that are played with a big hammer, percussionist plays. There are 3, and eventually in the story, the 3rd blow kills the hero. And out of superstition, Mahler, in the 2nd revision of the symphony, took out the 3rd blow. He said no, because he was himself. So he did 2 blows, and then the last one, he took it out. But that year, 1907, again, there were 3 big events in his life. His youngest daughter died of scarlet fever in that year. He was fired unceremoniously and in a very anti-Semitic way from the Vienna State Opera. And it was the same year that he was diagnosed with the heart problem that would kill him 4 years later. As the doctor came to see his wife Alma, who was inconsolable after the passing of his daughter, the doctor was there, and Mahler said, well, while you're here, why don't you check me? And when he heard his heart, he says, something's not right. And this would develop into something, and he died at age 50, very young. But after the Vienna State Opera fiasco, United States came calling. And for 1 year, he was music director of the Metropolitan Opera House. For 1 year. That's how much they put up with him. 1 year. Famous, unforgettable debut, New Year's Day, 1908, conducting Tristan and Isolde. Mahler was probably the greatest Wagner conductor at the time, and probably ever. And when that blew up, he went next door to conduct the fledgling New York Philharmonic Society. Became music director of the New York Philharmonic, and was still music director when he died. When he got sick, he was on the boat going back to Vienna to go to a sanatorium, and he got there and then he died. But the New York Philharmonic is really, at the time there were 2 orchestras, the New York Symphony and the New York Philharmonic Society. Eventually they're merged, but they were 2 different orchestras at the time. And Mahler was basically brought in to save what was the New York Philharmonic Society at the time, and he did. Again, the standards under him, because of fear, he basically fired everybody, I'm sure, and brought new players. But again, all of these things are legendary of what Gustav Mahler did. So he did spend a considerable amount of time in New York. And if you go to the New York website, the New York Times website, you can actually find pictures of Mahler, and reviews of his concerts when he was music director then. Tonight is especially unique because, as I said, this first symphony that you're going to hear tonight has gone through a lot of transformation. When the piece was first premiered in 1889, the piece came with a story. It had a title called Titan, which I think it might be on your program books, but it should not be. You see, later on, as about 10 years later, Mahler had made a major revision to the piece, and one of the first things he did is take out the story. And the title Titan actually comes from a novel by Jean-Paul, the great writer who was a favorite of Gustav Mahler, and it's actually the name of one of the novels of Jean-Paul. And there was a whole way of how the symphony was divided. There's a story of a hero, of nature, the usual. But then, as he revised it, 3rd or 4th time he conducted, he said, no more title. I don't think. One of the reasons that he wanted to take the story out is because Richard Strauss was becoming very popular around the same time. And Richard Strauss was known for writing tone poems, writing Also sprach Zarathustra and Heldenleben, and writing music that had specific stories. So Mahler, I guess, did not want to compete with that. There was a sense that, okay, you do your thing, maybe I should just write music without whatever story you want, fill it in yourself. So the title Titan was taken completely out. And to this day, we just call it Symphony No. 1, but for many people, it will always be the Titan. But more importantly, tonight, you're going to hear something very unique. In the first version of the symphony in 1889, when it was first performed, it actually had 5 movements. And if you look in your books, we're only doing 4, which is the version, 99.9% of the version is the version that Mahler revised, because he took out 1 entire movement. In 1893, which was the last time Mahler conducted the piece, and it reappeared in 1897 under the publisher house released in 1897, the piece came out with 4 movements. Again, Mahler himself did all of the revisions, but a myth started. People started talking about, no, this symphony, it had 5 movements. No, what are you talking about? And people started discussing. I was there at one of the performances, and I remember distinctively there were 5 movements. Mahler dies, life goes on. Again, his music does not get played often, so I think this myth is created that there was this mysterious 5th movement of the symphony. Life went on. Everybody assumed it's a 4-movement piece. That's what you're going to hear tonight. Everybody conducts 4 movements. 1959 comes around. Sotheby's auctions a score of Gustav Mahler's First Symphony, the score from 1893. It was owned by an American family, last name Feldperren. The daughter or the granddaughter of that family had been a student of Mahler in the late 1800s, and apparently Gustav Mahler gave this favorite student of his the score to the original version of the symphony, and guess what? There is a 5th movement. In between the 1st and 2nd is another movement. There it is, 1959. Almost 40 years after Mahler dies, we find that, yes, there was another movement. Mrs. James Osborne buys the score from Sotheby's in 1959. She and her husband are big supporters of Yale University, and they donate the score to the library, to the Osborne collection, and from then on, you can go there now, you can actually see the score, and there is this movement which is actually called Blumine. The best translation of Blumine is spring flower. It actually has a title, Blumine. And since then, many conductors have the decision whether they should do the original 5 movement included or just do the version that Mahler authorized. Because Mahler rejected that movement. I mean, let's face it, that's very clear that Mahler did not like that movement in there. The music is fantastic, though. So tonight, I think I came up with the best of both worlds. I will play it as an opener. I don't think I should do the movement in the 2nd as it was intended, because again, I will follow Mahler's instructions that this movement should not be a part of the symphony. He changed his mind and he's allowed to do that. But I think the music is still fantastic. So let's put it close enough to the symphony that at least you get a chance to hear it. Something that you're going to notice from the beginning is very un-Mahler-like. I can see why he took it out. I can see why the music is incredibly intimate, very small orchestra, 1 trumpet playing, I mean, no brass. I mean, it's not Mahler, it's not the bombastic stuff you expect. It's incredibly intimate, it's lovely. Again, it's like a spring flower. You can almost sing the tune. So tonight, you're going to get to hear this incredible Blumine movement, and then you can decide whether you think it belongs or not. Some conductors never ever did it. Some great Mahler conductors, I will tell you, Schulte never did it. You know, and he actually was totally against the idea. He's like, oh, Mahler hated it, burn it. You know, and many other conductors I know attempted at doing it and changed their minds as they went along. For me, maybe as my career progressed and I do the symphony more and more, this is actually the first time I'm doing the piece, by the way. I've been saving it for something special. It's one of my absolute favorite pieces of music in the repertoire, and it had to be under these conditions that I could do it. So the fact that I'm doing it with the Blumine, it's extra special. I don't think I will ever do it all together. I really don't see myself doing that, because I'm such a believer that Mahler was so specific about his instruction that I would not feel right going against that. Especially when he writes stuff like Nicht Eilen, you know. I can almost see him going, Nicht Blumine! In the end, this music touches the heart. The reason why this music is so immensely popular, and something else that Mahler has that no other composer has, all of his music is in the repertoire. Not even Mozart can say that. Mozart, of 41 symphonies, about 10 of them are in the standard repertoire. There are many of them that don't get played, but with Mahler, his entire work, all of them, are played regularly. All 9, 10, 11 symphonies, however you want to count them, are played on a regular basis all over the world. The song cycles are favorites. No other composer can claim to have his entire workload, which is very limited, be played on a regular basis. I cannot think of, not even Beethoven can say that. You know, there are pieces of Beethoven that don't get played. But more importantly, the fact that this composer has been able to make a psychological connection with audiences, not only 19th, 20th, and 21st century, is a testament to how we are all connected as human beings. How perhaps we can understand the grief, the tragedy, the hopes, the happiness that artists try to portray when they present their music or their art. And I think Gustav Mahler really hit a nerve with audiences all over the world. Not only because of the theatrics, the bombastic, the big orchestras, but it's what's underneath it, what I call it the shark under the water. That even as you hear this music, you can really feel the sense of grief, the sense of hope that we've all experienced in our own lives. And nobody can tell that type of a story, that type of a very simple life story, better than Gustav Mahler. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the concert.